the skies over Portugal.
What's happening? I have no control.
The pilots of a passenger jet are in the fight of their lives.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
I had never seen such an abrupt drop in altitude in an airplane.
This flight was the roller coaster ride from hell.
The crew is forced to make an unthinkable decision.
I think we have to ditch.
That's very unlikely that they would have had a good outcome.
When investigators pore over the plane's history,
This is confusing.
they discover critical evidence that the plane was impossible to control.
That's one big mistake.
What really surprised us was the fact that no one really noticed.
Air Astana Flight 1388 prepares for takeoff from Alverca do Ribatejo, an airbase 15 miles northeast of Lisbon, Portugal.
Before takeoff checklist. Roger.
"40-year-old Vyacheslav Aushev is the captain. The veteran pilot has been flying with Air Astana for 7 years.
Radar. On.
The captain of this crew had considerable time with Air Astana, flying this aircraft on which he had a great deal of experience. He's got 6,000 flight hours.
Flaps.
32-year-old First Officer Baujan Karasholikov is the pilot monitoring. He's been with Air Astana for 5 years.
Set for takeoff. Before takeoff checklist complete. Request takeoff clearance.
This flight crew was highly experienced in the normal commercial operation role. So they were selected because of those strengths.
Runway 04, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff. Looking forward to getting back home.
To help with the journey, the airline has sent along an extra pilot, 26-year-old Sergei Sokolov.
That day I was a relief pilot because the flight was long and I could switch my colleague if somebody tired.
After undergoing maintenance work in Portugal, today's 10-hour flight has a stop in Minsk before finally reaching Air Astana's home base of Almaty, Kazakhstan. There are no paying customers on board Flight 1388, just 3 maintenance staff employed by Air Astana.
The 3 passengers on board were made responsible for supplying the parts for their maintenance work in Portugal. They were excited to come home.
The recently serviced plane is a Brazilian-made Embraer E190.
It is a narrow-bodied, single-aisle, twin-engined aircraft which is used for medium range.
D1. Rotate.
The flight takes off just after 1:30 p.m.
Let's go home.
But seconds later,
What the?
the plane hits some turbulence, causing it to bank unusually hard to the left.
After takeoff, first indication was that the aircraft began to make a roll. So that is wrong movement of airplane.
That's not normal. What's happening? There's something wrong with the yoke. I've never felt anything like this before.
I felt that aircraft has too much oscillations. and Captain looked at me that we have some problem with flight controls.
No warnings or caution messages.
The pilots can't explain the plane's erratic movements. Flight 1388 is in serious trouble.
I have no control.
Maybe it's the control column.
The pilots search for a solution.
Engage autopilot.
Autopilot on?
It was reasonable to expect the autopilot to go, okay, forget about the control column. I will look after it because I've been programmed for the next phase of flight.
Autopilot failed.
The pilots are running out of options. They need help, and fast.
We were in the clouds, on uncontrollable airplane, in turbulent conditions.
This is a mayday. Mayday, mayday, mayday.
Climbing to 4,000 feet on heading 060.
Kilo Zulu Romeo 1388, roger, mayday.
Controller Viviana Durao receives the distress call from the aircraft.
Go ahead with your request.
As soon as Air Astana departed, they declared Mayday on the first contact. We're all trained to deal with these kinds of emergencies, but inevitably your heartbeat goes a little bit faster and your adrenaline peaks.
There's nothing in the quick reference handbook. We have to get back to the airport.
Agreed. Astana 1388 requesting back to airport.
Kilo Zulu Romeo 1388, you can turn left or right as you wish, heading 280.
Roger.
But heading back to the airport is an enormous challenge.
Every time we bank, we lose altitude. We've got to get higher to turn back.
To turn around safely, they need to climb or risk hitting terrain when they bank.
If you roll excessively, the pitch doesn't actually change much in terms of altitude, and in fact will allow the aircraft to drop. And that was alarming, to say the least.
Let's try to control from your side. At the close.
I don't think it's any better, but I'll try to climb. What about the flight computers?
Maybe there's a software bug.
The pilots speculate the problem is related to the replacement of 4 flight computers, something they learned about prior to takeoff.
They knew that there'd been a new software load for the flight control system. So it's very, very easy and sensible to make the conclusion that this is possibly the result of a glitch in the uploaded software.
Prepare to engage direct mode.
By engaging direct mode, pilots can bypass the flight computers, giving them full control.
My controls.
Roger, your controls. Ready to engage direct mode?
Engage direct mode for the roll.
The aircraft's performance improves.
Let's see if we can get back to Alverca.
But the pilot's relief does not last.
It's not enough. I don't have enough control to get us back to the airport.
The difficulty this crew had was they couldn't steer the airplane in any way. So to get back to the airport with the best will in the world wasn't going to happen.
What are we going to do?
With nothing working and the plane continuing to drop, the crew is faced with a grim option.
I think we have to ditch.
Ditching means attempting a very risky landing on water.
We were over the big populated city on uncontrollable airplane, and we could hit the ground at any time. We decided to ditch. This was one thing to stop this aircraft.
Request vectors for the ocean. Sergey, take over comms. And I will need help with the throttle.
Astana 1388.
Request heading for ditching.
That is like a bad dream, yes, or bad movie.
The aircraft is uncontrollable.
1388, fly heading 260.
So I was very concerned because I don't think any pilot requests ditching lightly. So if they thought that that was their best option, that meant they were in big trouble.
One 388, you can reach the sea on a heading of 210, approximately 36 miles.
For the last 18 minutes, Flight 1388 has been flying erratically over Portugal, unable to reach the Atlantic Ocean for a ditching.
We keep losing altitude.
Their biggest struggle is keeping the plane stable enough to reach a safe altitude above the clouds.
If you can climb above the cloud, then you do have that visual horizon again, which is going to help you. That buys you time to resolve the problem. And so altitude is good.
Just when nothing seems to be working, the captain gets an idea.
Let's try the flaps. Give me flaps too.
Roger. Flaps 2.
We kept the flaps extended. It helped us to stabilize the aircraft.
"30 minutes after takeoff, Flight 1388 finally rises above the clouds.
17,000 feet and we have visual meteorological conditions.
That was actually a good sign because if they could control the aircraft enough to climb over clouds, they weren't going to crash anytime soon. This was very good news.
But then, without warning, the plane plummets towards the Earth at 20,000 feet per minute.
Then we suddenly plunged to the left and dived with quick descent. Physically, it was horrible.
For the 3 passengers on board, it's a rough and terrifying ride.
Oh no.
I had never seen such an abrupt drop in altitude in an airplane, and this was very scary because we had no idea when they were going to stop.
Pull up! Pulling up!
40 seconds into the dive, the plane descends below cloud cover.
Keep it up! We've got this! Sergei, we need power!
During that rapid descent, there would have been slightly less than 1G, 1 times the force of gravity. But at the point at which you pull the aeroplane out of the dive, that G level picks up. And in this case, almost to fighter pilot levels.
The extreme maneuver stresses the airframe to its limit.
We heard some cracking of the airplane, of the G-bolt.
I saw the hill with the trees in front of us. It was close.
The plane holds together.
8,000 feet and climbing.
The pilots pull out of the dive just in time.
Well done.
Yeah. Wow, we're out of this nightmare.
Okay, let's try to get back on course towards the ocean.
Astana 1388.
Can you confirm our position in relation to the sea, please?
If you fly southbound, you need to go 36 miles.
But the battered aircraft still isn't responding predictably to the crew's inputs.
It's no good. I can't get to 220. See if I can stay on this heading.
1388. We are flying through a storm. Can we get to the sea on our current heading?
The weather was very bad, very windy, raining. The cloud ceiling was very low.
If you can fly westbound, you will reach the sea.
Okay.
"35 minutes into the flight, air traffic control calls the Portuguese Air Force for help.
The Air Astana was still in an area with very bad weather. They were having trouble navigating, and so we hoped that with the guidance of the F-16s, they could reach an area with better weather conditions.
Lieutenant Colonel Nuno Monteiro is one of 2 F-16 pilots sent to guide the aircraft to better weather and a place to ditch safely.
It was the worst day in terms of weather. I was in the squadron, and I knew that if the bell would ring that day, we had to act fast.
But can the F-16s reach Flight 1388 in time to help? Almost an hour into their trip, Flight 1388 awaits help from 2 Portuguese fighter jets.
Still climbing. Anybody need water?
But the pilots are exhausted.
It was very hard for us, physically and emotionally.
Can one of you bring us some water up here, please?
Your controls.
My controls.
What do you know about the maintenance that was done on this aircraft?
They did a lot of work. Replaced some parts, too.
Anything flight control related?
We ordered new aileron cables.
New aileron cables?
When we learned that aileron cables were changed, we realized the possible cause of the problem.
Ailerons are flight control surfaces on the rear edge of each wing. They hinge up and down to help control an aircraft's roll.
Let's check them.
I've got visuals on the right wing.
Inputting ailerons right.
As the captain turns the control column to the right wing aileron should lift.
Aileron going down. Turning left. That's wrong.
Let's try the reverse. Inputting aileron left.
We put inputs and we realized that this ailerons is responding opposite.
The ailerons are reversed.
With opposite inputs, we might be able to control the aircraft.
Now we know what's happening. Let's start to work with this. Okay, let's fly this aircraft oppositely. If you want to turn left, turn to the right.
It's a bit better, but still hard to fly.
This is going to take some getting used to.
Against his instincts and muscle memory, the captain tries to keep the plane's wings level and climb to better weather.
You have to learn a completely different process against the ingrained teaching you've already had, and that's very difficult.
61 minutes into the flight, help finally arrives.
Asta line 1388.
You have 2 F-16s reaching your position.
Copy that.
Kilo Zulu Romeo, this is Portuguese Air Defense, bullet 21. How's the system?
The altitude, heading, speed were far from being stable. And I had a lot of doubts at this moment. What can we do to help Air Astana flight?
We have a flight control problem and no visibility. Maintaining flight level 140 westbound and we'll make ditching on sea.
I thought, come again? I have never heard this call in my life as a pilot, and I've been an aviator for the past 25 years. I fear for them.
But given the weather, would they even survive a ditching in the ocean?
If the sea is very rough and you're trying to land across 3 meters or so of swell, that's very unlikely that they would have had a good outcome.
Lieutenant Colonel Montero proposes a different plan.
If you have 70 miles of fuel, you could try Beja.
The closest airport with good weather is Beja, a military airport 70 miles to the south.
If we follow the F-16s, do you think we could land this thing?
We have enough fuel.
Let's try.
Now we could stably climb above the clouds. F-16 means we are not alone in the sky, and F-16 can lead us to airport with a better weather.
The aircraft is a little bit more controllable.
Confirmed. We'll help you land.
Can you confirm heading for Beja Airport?
Beja is a suitable aerodrome heading 195.
Right heading 195.
Okay, let's see if we can land this thing.
Using the F-16 on their left as a visual reference, Flight 1388 heads to Beja Airfield.
I'll guide you in. Do you have a visual on me?
Affirmative. Thank you for helping, sir.
We disregarded the ditching because now we at least know how to fly this aircraft. Now we need to land it. Now we have chance to survive. When you're flying oppositely, it's really hard to keep it straight and level 100% of the time. We understood that landing will not be easy.
We are now 6 miles from runway.
After 15 minutes of flying towards Beja Airfield, the crew begins to configure the plane for a challenging landing.
Flaps full. Whoa! Watch out.
But the stability of the aircraft gets worse.
We flew flaps 2 and now flaps 5, landing gear down. So these conditions is new for this airplane. So it means you have to learn to fly it again.
With the ailerons reversed, Flight 1388 is almost impossible to control. Both F-16s position themselves behind the plane, giving the crew plenty of space without distraction.
1,000 feet. You got this.
Guys, support me and said, yes, you're doing right. Everything will okay. We will survive.
Less than 1,000 feet from the runway, the pilots struggle to keep the plane level.
With the low speed on the approach, you have to have minor inputs on the yoke. And it's really difficult.
The aircraft begins to veer away from the runway.
Go around!
Going around!
It's too dangerous to put the plane down. They abort the landing.
I don't think I can do this. You have to try something else.
The pilots are determined to try again. But can they make it?
I looked at the guys and I saw that we all wanted to solve this problem and bring this aircraft to the ground.
1.
After nearly 2 hours in the air and 2 unsuccessful landing attempts, Flight 1388 flies towards the runway again.
Turning left, heading 189. Going to take us back in.
Roger.
With the captain and the first officer exhausted, the relief pilot takes the controls for the 3rd landing attempt.
That's like in football. When you need a win goal, you change the player.
Going to try and get away from you. Be ready for anything.
I was less tired, but I realized that it's really difficult to control airplane.
There's 1,000. Watch for the right roll as we get down.
1,000.
We're drifting too far to the left.
I'm trying to get back to center.
A mile from the runway, the weather impedes the landing attempt.
The wind conditions changed. The airplane started to deviate again to the left.
The captain quickly improvises an alternate plan.
We can make it to the other runway there. 19 left.
I see it. I'll try.
Can we land on the left runway?
Confirmed. Clear to land on left runway.
Roger.
Here we go.
After a grueling 2 hours in the air, Flight 1388 lands safely in Beja.
We did it.
Through teamwork and determination, the crew has made a stunning landing.
I was happy. The flight is finished. Aircraft brought into stop, and we finally can say we've done it.
Godspeed, man. I'm so glad you're out there.
It was one of the happiest moments in my life as a military pilot. I felt relieved and I felt extremely thankful to see that aircraft on the ground.
The only injury is a sprained ankle to one of the maintenance staff.
I felt relief. I was very happy that we made it and we landed the aircraft in one piece.
But now it's up to Portuguese air and rail accident investigators to find out why it happened at all. Within 2 hours of landing, investigators from the Portuguese Safety Investigation Authority arrive at Beja Air Base. José Figueiredo is the lead investigator overseeing the investigation.
Good to see it's in one piece.
We knew that something was wrong, really wrong with the aircraft.
Investigators examined the aircraft for signs of damage.
Nose looks fine. Check this out. Deformations.
There wasn't any visible damage as we approached the aircraft. However, we found wrinkles on the surface of the fuselage and on the leading edge of the wing.
The damage indicates that Flight 1388 suffered extreme forces in flight.
Can't believe they landed this plane.
The incident is declared an accident because of the severity of the damage. The aircraft is a write-off.
The definition of an accident typically involves the destruction of the aircraft and fatalities. But we decided to classify this event an accident rather than an incident because we felt it was important to draw attention to what happened here.
Let's see what the crew can tell us.
We called the control tower at Beja and request the pilots to stay on the aircraft until we arrive there.
It was key for us to speak to the pilots so that we could get a first-hand account of what had occurred and to try and get as much valuable information from them as possible.
When did you realize there was a problem?
Immediately after takeoff, the plane started rolling back and forth.
What's happening?
There's something wrong with the yoke. I've never felt anything like this before. There's a total disconnect between the control yoke and the aircraft.
Were there any alerts or indications of what went wrong?
No, but one of the maintenance team on board remembers ordering new aileron cables for the aircraft. So we did a visual inspection, and it seems that ailerons were moving in reverse.
We couldn't believe it when the crew told us. We wanted to perform an operational test to confirm for ourselves what was the real issue.
Okay, show us the left aileron.
Copy.
Investigators test the ailerons to verify that they were moving in opposite directions.
Yoke to the left.
Two control surfaces work in tandem to turn the plane. Both the aileron and the spoiler must move upwards on the wing to turn the plane to the left.
The spoiler's fine, but the left aileron moved down instead of up. It's reverse.
It's as if the steering wheel of your car was giving inverted commands, or the handlebar of your bicycle was inverted as well.
It would have been next to impossible to control.
The next big question the investigation was facing was, how did this happen?
Maintenance began on October 2nd.
Investigators review Flight 1388's maintenance records for an explanation why the ailerons were inverted.
And it continued up until the morning of the accident.
The aircraft was serviced in Portugal for a month by a third-party company owned by Embraer.
When airlines don't have the maintenance facilities capable of doing the deep servicing, they contract external suppliers, and that was the case here.
It was necessary to find out what had happened during the month or so that the aircraft was in maintenance.
Investigators meet with the maintenance supervisor to find out more about the work performed on the aircraft.
Why did the plane require aileron maintenance service?
The aileron cables were old.
When commanded, 4 aileron cables move the ailerons up and down. Each cable moves through a pulley system. Cable friction on the pulleys can cause premature wear.
We replaced the pulley system with a frictionless one to prevent future wear and tear.
Operator said, complaining to Embraer about the premature wear on the stainless steel cables. So Embraer came up with a design fix to this issue, and the aircraft was being refitted with the new contactless system.
It says here, the aileron maintenance began on October 9th.
Correct. The structures team started by removing the old pulleys and cables.
The new installation uses mostly square metal frames instead of pulleys to guide the cables through the wing. This minimizes any wear caused by friction.
And what did the structures team do next?
They reinstalled the old cables as a temporary measure until the flight control team installed the new cables.
The structures team reinstalled the old cables once they had finished replacing the hardware, because that is what the procedures required them to do. They were following the instructions.
Is it possible that they inverted the old cables when they reinstalled them?
It's possible. I'm told they had a hard time following the instructions.
Where do they struggle with the instructions?
Right here.
They identify a key section where the structures team had difficulty understanding the instructions.
This looks like the reverse zone.
The reverse zone is a 2-meter-long section inside the wing where the cable routing changes from horizontal to vertical.
This is confusing. Did the technician ask for help?
I'm told he asked another engineer on the team.
The structural engineer consulted a colleague who had also limited experience, and the manual instructions were quite difficult to follow.
Did you test the reinstallation?
They weren't required to.
This kind of work required extensive experience, so without surprise, they did it incorrectly.
Not only did the structures team incorrectly reinstall the old cables, they never tested the ailerons to confirm that they installed them correctly.
The structure team were informed that the flight control team would come later to replace those cables.
Did the flight control team catch the error?
Not likely. I'm told they installed the new cables following the same routing.
The flight control team replaced the cables one by one, installing the new cables as a direct replacement and without verifying the previous routing.
So why didn't the flight control team discover the mistake after they finished the installation and then tested the ailerons? Investigators check the fault history database for answers.
The fault history database records data about the maintenance work that was done on the aircraft. So it will tell us, for example, when the aircraft was powered up, when it was powered down, what systems were operating, and at what time.
Installation of the new cables was completed on October the 17th.
Well, according to this, they couldn't test the ailerons on the 17th. The plane was still under maintenance.
The investigation knew that the ailerons had not been checked on that day because you need to power up the aircraft. And from the data that we could see in the fault history database, this never happened.
When did they complete the maintenance?
On October 26th, they have finished the additional maintenance and powered up the plane.
Did they test the ailerons then?
It doesn't look like they could. Well, they got a fault warning in the cockpit. Flight control, no dispatch.
Flight control no dispatch is a catch-all message which alerts the flight crew that something needs attention before going flying. It could be a sensor, it could be a connection that is loose.
They didn't know what caused the fault.
Regardless, they can't fly with the error message.
While the error message had nothing to do with the inverted aileron cables, it diverted technicians' attention away from the aileron repair.
And so when they experienced the flight control no dispatch, this put a lot of pressure on all of the maintenance technicians.
What did you do when your crew got the flight control no dispatch message?
Investigators delve into how the maintenance team of Flight 1388 dealt with a no-fly error message after completing maintenance work on the plane.
I dispatched a team to investigate.
Were they able to determine the issue and clear the problem?
No.
The maintenance team started by referring to the manuals. They also asked support from the manufacturer. However, all of these efforts had a limited result.
How did they resolve the error message?
They replaced the flight control computers.
With no success resolving the error message, the maintenance team considers the possibility that the issue involves the flight control computers.
These were new computers. So these being new computers, they had clean memories.
When they powered up the plane, the error message was gone.
When those 4 flight control modules were replaced, the message disappeared and the plane was cleared to fly.
Did you test the ailerons after that?
Sure did. We checked all the flight controls.
And what about a visual check?
Absolutely. They were moving up and down, no problem.
Did they check to see that they were moving in the right direction?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if they did or not.
The operational checks were performed. However, no one really noticed that despite the movement of the ailerons, that in fact they were moving in the opposite direction to what is being commanded.
Thanks for your time.
It's one big mistake that nobody caught.
Investigators finally understand what happened to Air Astana Flight 1388. The groundwork for the terrifying flight was laid a month earlier when a maintenance team inverted the aileron cables because the instructions were confusing. When they prepare to test the aileron cables, they get distracted by a mysterious error message. Maintenance technicians clear the error message by replacing flight computers. But when they check that the ailerons are working, they never look to see what direction they're moving.
What's happening?
There's something wrong with the yoke. I've never felt anything like this before.
This chain of events sets Flight 1388 on a harrowing 116-minute flight.
There's 1,000. Watch for the right roll as we get down.
1,000?
Remarkably, they are able to overcome their difficulties through focus and good teamwork.
I'll guide you in.
Do you have a visual of me?
The aid of an experienced fighter pilot finally helps them to land the plane.
The situation looked dire for a long time, and knowing that they had landed safely was just a tremendous relief.
The really impressive thing is that this crew, who are not experienced flight test pilots who'd come across completely non-standard situations before, just how quickly they settled down to work it through logically. They did really well.
As a result of this accident and investigation, several safety changes are made.
There were a lot of changes at Embraer in terms of revising their manuals and making the instructions much clearer when it comes to replacing the aileron control cables.
Air Astana installed more robust procedures for checking aircraft after completing maintenance.
New procedures were made for checking the flight controls, including making sure the correct movement of the ailerons. Maintenance errors have occurred in the past, and I think what this event demonstrates is that it underscores the importance that all of the stakeholders, including maintenance, play in achieving flight safety.